Salvatore can't believe it. His head is still humming with the noise of machinery in the large Boston shoe factory. He's constantly thinking about the conveyor belt, with its hundreds and thousands and millions of shoes. The footwear's quality is good enough, but they're always the same, clunky and heavy. Salvatore, on the other hand, dreams of footwear that is light and unique. This is the story of Salvatore Ferragamo, Shoemaker of Dreams, a podcast series from Cora Media for Museo Ferragamo. Episode 2, California. When we're insecure, life choices are always difficult and dangerous. It takes just a moment of hesitation to choose the wrong road, and one that we can't come back on. But in Salvatore's case, things are different. It's almost as if an invisible hand or some sort of fate is always by his side, telling him what to do.
That same day, I wrote to my brothers in Santa Barbara, telling them I was not content to learn shoemaking by machines, and saying I would join them if they could send me some money. So, within a week of arriving in America, I was in a transcontinental railroad car heading west through a fabulous country.
It's spring 1915. Salvatore decides to leave and reach his brothers Alfonso, Girolamo, and Secundino in Santa Barbara. Like many Italians, they left Boston for California, where immigrants could find a better and more tolerant life. Salvatore's move from Boston to Santa Barbara sounds like an epic voyage.
The journey took 6 days and 6 nights. I sat in my tip back seat and stared out of the windows, fascinated by the vastness of the land. In Bonito, I had thought my parents' property was large. Here, I realized that it was only a postage stamp. The journey had been a perpetual delight. With every mile, a new vista opened. And even when we began to run through the final stage, the environs of Santa Barbara on the branch line from Los Angeles, I could not feel myself out of place or fearful. I was only a boy and I had no job, yet I refused to consider what would happen to me.
As soon as he sets foot in Santa Barbara, Salvatore is dazzled by the mansion surrounded by flower gardens. He immediately runs to buy postcards with cityscapes. He wants to send them back to Bonito right away. He can't wait to show his mother what this famous California actually looks like. Elvira Valeri tells us what Santa Barbara is like when Salvatore arrives there.
At
the tail end of the 19th century, the city became a tourist attraction, with its beaches, pools, hotels, and clubs where business tycoons meet. This is the world that the young Italian-speaking 17-year-old finds waiting for him, right out of a fairy tale.
Salvatore is happy to see his brothers Girolamo, Alfonso, and Secundino again. A piece of the Ferragamo family is back together. But there's little time for reminiscing. The future is waiting. These are the early years of the Santa Barbara movie industry, as told to us by Stefania Ricci, director of Museo Ferragamo.
Gli anni trascorsi da Salvatore Ferragamo.
Salvatore Ferragamo's years in Santa Barbara are essential for his future work efforts. He immediately gets in touch with the movie business, which will have a primary role in his professional life. He builds a relationship with the Flying A Studio, a production house which is also called the American Film Company, that moved here from Chicago in 1914, and which produces mostly westerns, at the time the most popular genre in American cinema. The choice to move to California was for the variety of scenery, plains, forests, wonderful coastlines, but most importantly, the light, which is essential for movie making. So, Ferragamo's first important job is that of adapting shoes for Flying A Studio Productions. which is located near the Mission Canyon where Ferragamo initially lives with his brothers. Salvatore Ferragamo can immediately see how the movies are the right window for his shoes. More so even than fashion magazines, which aren't read by everybody. On the silver screen, clothes, details and accessories are perfectly visible to all. And this allows him to create a style and a new fashion to imitate.
È una nuova moda da imitare.
My attitude was plain and, I am afraid, uncompromising. I wanted to make shoes and I wanted to make them by hand. My few days in America had stimulated my mind and my imagination. Limitless horizons spread before me. New models and new designs jostled in my brain. In my adolescent exuberance and my inborn knowledge of my destiny, I believed I could do anything. I could do anything if only I could get a start.
America, California, the promised land. A new world, a new land to till, a new imagery to work on. There's a little something for everyone, even for the Ferragamo brothers, who are taking their first steps in the American dream thanks to the American Film Company. The plan is this: offer the studio Salvatore's handmade shoes for their latest movies, and at the same time, open a repair shop where the whole family can work.
So, a few days later, I entered a film studio for the first time. How shall I explain my feelings as I strolled about the place, looking at the dresses and cloaks and hats and shoes? I can only say that here I felt instantly at home. I wanted to work here. I felt immediately that this was work that I could do, if only the work was available. Shortly afterward, my eyes fell on a handsome pair of cowboy boots. I had never seen cowboy boots before, and I picked them up, fondling the leather, examining the style. Emotion rose within me, the emotion I always feel when a challenge is placed before me.
Salvatore's feeling of familiarity as he touches those cowboy boots in the costume department of the American Film Company is somehow prophetic. Indeed, he gets the job right out of the gate, and for many years the studios will be his second home. His first job is to improve a pair of boots produced in a factory in Northern California. The head of the costume department, after putting Salvatore to the test, has no doubts. He's the man for all future films. Not just for boots. Shortly after, Salvatore receives the commission for every kind of shoe. For historical movies, for period pieces, for swashbuckling films, and then finally, shoes for actresses. The Ferragamo brothers' shop has just opened, and it's already renowned for the quality of their reparation work, as well as the creation of new models for increasingly more sophisticated and demanding clients, especially from the movie business.
The most important development of my career at that time, however, was the arrival of the stars with orders for their personal shoes. Lottie Pickford, effervescent, excitable, and extravagant, the antithesis of her sister, then Mary Pickford herself. Afterward came the Costello sisters, and Barbara Lamar, Helen Hayward, Paula Negri, May McAvoy. It was for Lottie that I created my first model, a plain pair of court shoes in brown kidskin leather. Fancy leathers were scarce in those days, with twin ears sticking up at the front. They were the craziest shoes you ever did see, but they were certainly different. Lottie was delighted. She walked out of our shop as if she were walking on air.
And this is just how the first Salvatore customers feel, as if they are walking on air. But what does this mean? Let's think about it. First of all, it means to fly away because the air is up among the clouds, of course. Mere mortals walk on the ground, on concrete. Perhaps, if lucky, on a patch of grass or on a California beach. Instead, Lottie Pickford, just like all the other lucky customers of Ferragamo, is flying on a paper-thin magic carpet, looking down upon the whole world. Is it fate? Magic? Luck? What is the young Italian's secret? Stefania Ricci helps us understand where Salvatore's success is coming from, right from the beginning.
Il segreto del successo di Salvatore.
The secret to Salvatore's success goes beyond mere aesthetics, beyond the beauty of his models, but is found especially in his shoes' comfort, which is what he'll work on throughout his entire career. Today, we remember the artist, the great craftsman, the man who revolutionized the idea of shoe itself. However, the real universe, the most extraordinary part of his life, is in the personal relationship between his shoes and his customers' feet. It's here that the figure turns into that of a wizard, of a medicine man, of an architect and an engineer. In the many pictures of the Ferragamo archive of Florence, we often see Salvatore touching his customers' feet, and we can clearly see that the quality of his work is in this empathy, in this personal and intimate relationship that he creates through the mere power of touch.
Proprio attraverso il tocco dei piedi dei clienti.
Working so closely with movie stars and the store's clientele, Salvatore soon realizes that he'll have to learn English, so he signs up for night school. And he doesn't stop there. His English is soon perfect, and he can finally start attending night classes in anatomy at the University of Southern California in LA to perfect his knowledge of feet and the skeleton.
Non aveva ancora ottenuto la cittadinanza.
He's not a citizen yet, but he still chooses to attend university. This anatomy course was opened by the University of California in Los Angeles, and he attends as a listener, as he never finished school, so he can't officially follow the courses. Every week, he travels 60 kilometers to Los Angeles, and he spends all his precious free time studying how to make shoes that are not only beautiful and desirable, but also allow his customers to walk comfortably.
Al cliente di camminare bene.
This incredible story began with a child from Bonito who never finished elementary school and who made a pair of little white shoes in just one night. That same child, at the age of 14, traveled to Naples to become a shoemaker, and in just a few months, he had his own shop. And now we find him again, little more than 18, in a shop of Santa Barbara, eating a hot pepper sandwich with a star like Douglas Fairbanks, who loves Italian food. Or we see him sitting at a desk of the University of Southern California, studying anatomy, learning about the bones of a skeleton.
One night, after a particularly sharp question, the professor did not answer immediately. He looked at me reflectively and said slowly, "Now, why, Mr. Ferragamo, are you so interested in the skeleton?" I replied at once, "I am a shoemaker and I'm interested in the feet."
Grazie a
By studying
gli studi
anatomy
di
in California, Ferragamo finally finds the key to what puzzled him all those years in Bonito and Naples. Why some shoes fit and others don't. The secret is in the construction of the foot and in how the weight of the body impacts the plantar arch, or to be more precise, the many plantar arches which make up the foot and which support the entire weight of the person in just a few centimeters and are able to distribute the weight laterally on the heel and toe, just like an architectural arch. Thanks to these studies, Ferragamo creates new shoes with the support of the plantar arch by means of a steel plate, a shank, which is inserted between the insole and the sole that rests on the ground. In this way, the metatarsal and heel joints no longer support the weight, and the shank supports the plantar arch, which has this essential function, especially when it comes to women's shoes and heels.
dove chiaramente c'è il tacco.
His studies in anatomy go hand in hand with his experience in the shop. Every day, Salvatore deals with different types of feet. and so he develops a new way to measure the foot in order to find the perfect fit.
Durante gli anni,
During the Santa Barbara years, Ferragamo realizes that feet can vary not just in length, but also width, according to the build of a person. The USA is a melting pot, so he has the opportunity to work with different types of foot, such as the longer ones of the Anglo-Saxons, or the average-sized ones of Europeans, or the slightly large soles of Asians. He soon understands that one measure won't fit all. So he starts working on new shapes which he can combine with several widths, each of which marked by letters of the alphabet. 4A is the starting point, and it indicates the minimum width of a very thin foot, up to the widest, which is a D. He understood already during his factory days in Boston. But Ferragamo adds new studies on top of it. So the wooden shapes that Ferragamo creates and on which he models his shoes are completely original and require manual processing. This, in addition to the wooden formwork that provides the shape, allows modifications by smoothing the wood, adding putty, as if the result were like a sculpture, more a work of art than a shoe.
fosse una scultura, un'opera d'arte.
At this point, the Ferragamo store has become a fixture in Santa Barbara. And when Elio, the youngest brother, also comes to America, Salvatore is overjoyed, despite the dark clouds of the Great War which will soon engulf the whole world. By now, we should know that in this story, things never go as we expect them to. Salvatore's destiny won't be Santa Barbara. His vocation pushes him deeper into the American dream, Hollywood itself. And it's here that the American film company chooses to move production. And Salvatore himself, having seen the so-called studio system firsthand, decides to leave Santa Barbara.
I have been blessed, or cursed, depends on the way you look at it, with an incurably restless, probing mind and an inordinate capacity for hard work. Many were the times when I wondered why I was not as other men. Why I was not like my elder brothers, content with the things they possessed, hankering not after the fruits of tomorrow.
When Salvatore suggests that his brothers quit with repairs and instead focus on tailoring shoes for Hollywood, Alfonso, Girolamo, and Secundino don't agree. They fear that it's too risky an investment. But in the end, they'll find a compromise, move the repair shop to Los Angeles, close enough to Hollywood for Salvatore to work both at the shop and at the studios. It's the 4th of February, 1920. Salvatore is driving his new car, a Hudson 6, towards Los Angeles. He's with friends and his brothers Secundino and Elio when suddenly on Rincon Highway near Ventura...
I remember little of the actual crash. I remember the car twisting over and over, and then I was lying at the bottom of the car with a terrible pain in my thigh. Elio was unconscious.
Elio, the youngest of them, the favorite, won't make it. Salvatore falls into a well of despair. Suddenly, his dreams of Hollywood, his hopes and ambitions, all disappear. Nothing matters anymore.
His death was like the end of the world. Now, in my heartbreak and despair, I blame myself for his death. If I had not been so stubborn, so set upon the Hollywood shop, he would not now be lying dead. For many days, I could find no comfort. Though I might solve my problems and make a joint success of my new venture, yet I could not bring back Elio from the grave. Never again could we share the little triumphs of our lives.
The loss of Elio isn't the only dramatic consequence of the accident. Salvatore has suffered a terrible wound. He's hospitalized at the Bard Memorial Hospital of Ventura, and he risks losing a leg. Only thanks to Dr. Rexwold Brown, an old friend from Santa Barbara, does he avoid amputation. But the diagnosis is hardly reassuring. Even after the operation, one leg will be permanently shorter than the other. In order to reduce his limp, Salvatore goes through a series of terrible, painful sessions of leg stretching. Anyone else would simply accept the pain and the consequences of the accident. After all, the doctors are very clear. That is the only cure. There is no alternative. Salvatore, however, has been studying anatomy, and he sees things differently. There is an alternative. He's so certain of it that in just 6 months, he invents a new orthopedic device and tests it on himself. It will be Salvatore's first patent. Stefania Ricci tells us about it.
E si tratta proprio di una macchina.
It's a device that allows traction of the leg or fractured limb, and a particular screw device, which spaces the bone daily as to avoid calcification and shortening of the leg. The patent is American, the apparatus for supporting injured limbs, which will later be produced by an orthopedic company in Chicago. It is the first of a long series of patents that will be experimented with when Ferragamo returns to Italy, and which are now preserved in the State Archive of Rome.
Di Stato di Roma.
Salvatore is finally dismissed from the hospital. He returns to Santa Barbara, but has no intention of staying. His goal is the same as that of 6 months earlier, to convince all his brothers to move to Hollywood. The family bickers once again. The brothers are doubtful, and they don't want to invest everything they have in a place which at the time was nothing more than a sunny little Californian town. Its only resource is some nascent movie studios. So Salvatore, with his gift of foresight, leaves on his own.
Hollywood was calling. The future was calling. I felt no fear for the future.
You have listened to a podcast by Cora Media for Museo Ferragamo. Written by Rosella Bettinardi. Editing by Davide Savelli. Executive producer is Lia Chiovari. English version translated by John Vincent Aquilecchia, with the participation of Stefania Ricci, Elvira Valleri. Voice of Salvatore Ferragamo, Eric Alexander. Narrator, Caterina Yuca Sforza. Voice of Stefania Ricci, Liliana Oliveri. Voice of Elvira Valleri, Jenny Elizabeth Kuehl. For Museo Ferragamo, editorial supervision by Stefania Ricci and Ludovica Barabino. Editorial coordination by Paola Gusella. Sound and music supervision by Luca Micheli. Post-production and sound design by Mattia Licciotti. Sound engineer Luca Possi.